Special thanks to Sprint for sending out the review.
And what's up everybody, and this is Danny, and welcome to my HTC 8XT review. And this is one of two Windows phones coming to Sprint this summer, so let's go ahead and dive in and take a closer look. So it has been forever since Sprint has offered a Windows phone, but you would think that they would come back strong and hit you with the best that Windows Phone has. And really not true for this device. This is a mid-ranger, a 1.4 GHz dual-core Snapdragon 400 processor with 1 GB of RAM, 8 GB of onboard storage with micro SD card slot, thank goodness, 4.3-inch 480 by 800 screen. That is pretty low res at 217 ppi, LTE with an 8 megapixel camera. Now, if you know Windows Phone at all, it has never been about specs, so even though this has a Snapdragon 400 processor, it blazes by. I've had no performance issues with this at all. I've heard some other reviewers, and I've also seen some other reviews that complain about the responsiveness of this device, but I've actually had no problem. I think they might have done a software update in between the time, and I haven't seen it at all. This device performs like pretty much every other Windows phone I've ever tested and used. And this design here is very reminiscent of the HTC 8X, which was very popular, and it kind of marries the design of the 8S they also released with that two-tone color. And it feels pretty good in the hand, nice and rounded with the matte finish. All wrapped up in that Super LCD 2 display, which has fantastic viewing angles and good color replication, and the touch response is good, and this screen is not as bad as the specs make it sound. A quick hardware tour shows that this pretty much takes the same design language as their very popular HTC 8X, and it has the volume rockers on the side with the two-stage shutter key for the camera. It also has the power button up top with a 3.5mm headphone jack, and on the other side you see absolutely nothing, just smooth rounded edges with that nice rubberized finish, and on the bottom you'll see the primary microphone and the USB. So this is only available in one color, and that is California Blue, and it has the Beats Audio logo on the back, so you know it has Beats Audio support, the HTC logo, and around that silver camera ring you see a f2.0 8 megapixel sensor with a secondary microphone and LED flash. So on the front we do have a 4.3-inch display that is definitely lower resolution than we're used to, and on the bottom we have the typical back, the Microsoft Home button, and the search button. But what's not typical is on the bottom, which is one of two boom sound speakers, and on the top the earpiece also doubles as a second stereo speaker, and you see the wide angle front facing camera there, so you can go ahead and take all the selfies that you want and get other people in it. So first and foremost, this is a phone, so let's jump right into the call quality, and this is exclusive to the Sprint 4G LTE network in the United States right now. And I found that the build of this phone and the compactness of the 4.3-inch display made it very easy for me to hold in the hand, and it was comfortable to talk with the phone. And the earpiece was nice and loud, and it wasn't the clearest earpiece that I've ever heard. I've heard better phone call quality on different phones before. Even on the HTC One, I thought the call quality was a little bit better, but I didn't drop any calls in the metro areas, but in the rural areas I definitely dropped a few phone calls, and that's just due to the network. But overall I had a pretty pleasant experience with the phone. People said I sounded good on the other side. The noise cancellation was okay, but on call quality it was pretty decent. Not the best I've heard though. The speakerphone was pretty decent too, so I don't think you'll have problems with the call quality. So I've noticed that some reviewers and some users have been complaining about the performance issues on the 8XT, and I've had none in the 2+ weeks that I've been using this device, and whatever they've done, they must have pushed out an update. But the only thing they haven't fixed is that audio bug, and I wasn't able to create that on camera, and it's happened to me about 4 or 5 times. But sometimes when you're streaming, especially over cellular data, and you're streaming music, it just gets all robotic and choppy, and it just sounds really weird, and it's just unusable, and you have to stop the music and push it back on for it to stop, and sometimes it just doesn't stop at all. So that nasty bug is still there, so hopefully they fix it. But besides that, as you can see, that the web browsing is snappy and it's just very responsive. I haven't had any problems with the actual performance of the device itself, besides that audio bug. Now, one of those big problems with the 8XT was that if you were streaming audio like Spotify, it would just bring everything else to a complete crawl. And it really does not on my version that I'm testing right now. And it's been a pleasure when it actually doesn't have that audio bug to listen to this music on the Boom Sound speakers. Now, the Boom Sound speakers are not as loud as the HTC One, obviously, because they're smaller speakers. But if you see here that I'm running Spotify right now in the background and there is no choppiness or lag whatsoever. And on some of the other reviews that I've seen, it just comes to a complete crawl where it just doesn't function and the animations are super choppy. But I've had no problems with this whatsoever, as evidenced here. And you can hear that Spotify is playing in the background. So HTC is definitely doing something right with those stereo speakers. So let's talk about this 8 megapixel camera on the 8XT, and this is pretty much the same 8 megapixel f2.0 lens that they were using prior to the ultra pixel technology that they introduced with the HTC One. So if you hit that 2-stage camera key, it takes you right to the Windows Phone camera app. But what's awesome about this phone is it has HTC Burst, and it also has HTC Camera, which has some different functions. So if you hit that, you will notice that this looks more like the one that's on the HTC One right now, where the camera and the video button is separated. You get some live filters here, so you get a lot more options with this camera than you would maybe with some other Windows phones. And I really like that. Maybe not as much as you would with a Lumia, but it's nice that they put this on there. And if you just hold down that camera button, you get to take a lot of burst shots, and you get some extra editing features here like best shot and things like that. So kudos to HTC for including that. So the images are pretty much what you would expect from a modern 8 megapixel camera. It takes pretty detailed shots, but it can get a little bit soft under macro focus, and the colors can be muted under certain conditions. But for the most part, it takes pretty respectable pictures, and on things like the flower here, it can oversaturate a little, but overall, I think the images are pretty detailed and pretty sharp. Now, the 1080p video is also definitely passable here, and it definitely picks up a good amount of detail. As you can see that there's an ant running around, and it follows up pretty well with that. The only problem that I had with the images and the video is that it could have picked it up a little bit faster with the focus, and sometimes macro focus is an issue. You'll have to focus again and again and again, but that's just a little bit minor pickings there. For most cameras do that anyway. The quality of the audio is not going to blow your mind, but it will definitely do. But the video here is pretty smooth. You don't see any artifacting or chopping or anything, and I don't think you will be disappointed with this 8 megapixel camera on the HTC 8XT. So what about gaming? Windows Phone doesn't have a whole lot of games that are out there. That's getting a lot better, and the games can be a little pricey, but for what's available, like Temple Run here, which is free by the way, it plays fairly well, no skips or anything there, and even more graphically intensive games like Modern Combat 4 here plays pretty well. Since this has a low-res screen, it does much better with the older GPU, and I'm getting better frame rates out of here than I am on my Lumia 1020. So I don't think you'll have a problem gaming on here at all. I think it runs very smooth, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you watch this little bit of gameplay. So overall, the 8XT is a very capable mid-range device. But is this the Windows Phone that you're going to want right now? And with Sprint just not having a Windows Phone for a long time, and this is only one of 2 mid-range Windows Phone 8 devices out there, since the Samsung is also a mid-range device, it just makes me wonder a little bit, because I wish they would have just rebranded the 8X and brought that over, because that's a better phone than this with higher specs, and it just makes no sense to me. This 1800 milliamp battery is definitely mediocre, and the standby time is definitely bad on this phone. I mean, I will drain from 100% to 75 when I wake up, sleeping maybe 8 hours, and that standby is just not good. And the battery life is about 8 hours for me, with decent use. The longest I've got on this is 10 hours if I use it very sparingly. So the battery life is definitely not as good as the 8X that I had before. So is this a bad phone? Absolutely not. But there are some bugs and little things that you won't like about this phone, and for you to spend a 2-year contract to be locked up to this Windows phone when I know that there's other Windows phones coming out later this year, I would probably wait on these Windows Phone devices from Sprint and see if they pick up a flagship later on down the road when the new Windows Phone supports quad-core processors and 1080p screens and all that goodness to catch up to the rest of them. But if you absolutely have to have a Windows Phone device, make sure you check this out in the store first. So please leave your comments in the comments below, and that does it for me. Please subscribe so you don't miss another video, and follow me at Super Scientific on Twitter. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.